me. To give you weapons like your information for your journey and still you just bullshit and try to hurt me. Life's tough when you're an NPC. Life's rough when you...
What to do today? I mean, I haven't really talked about World of Darkness in a while, as far as Crit or Miss is concerned. Screw it. Let's talk about one of the greatest games to ever be made. I mean this with absolutely no hyperbole, and will stick to my guns on this one stalwartly. Changeling the Lost is one of the greatest tabletop role-playing games of all time, and probably 1 second only to Vampire the Masquerade in terms of popularity, value, and historical significance in the nerd community and the World of Darkness community. Yes, I am going there. I'm going there hard. I mean this 100%. Changeling the Lost is one of the greatest role-playing games ever made and deserves to be counted among the absolute top-tier greats. It deserves to be mentioned in the same conversation as Vampire the Masquerade, Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, GURPS, Shadowrun, Call of Cthulhu. It deserves to be in that conversation. And the best part about it is the fact that it was never expected to be anything great. Sure, it was expected to sell well, as most Chronicle of Darkness games and World of Darkness games were, but World of Darkness flagship trifecta going into the new World of Darkness reimaginings of the franchise was Vampire the Requiem, Mage the Awakening, and Werewolf the Forsaken. These were the ones that were supposed to sell well, and the other ones were supposed to be supplements with very strong but small fan bases. Changeling the Lost was meant to be a limited edition run, with only 5 additional books published to go along with the core book. However, due to its massive popularity, the game got additional books and has become one of the biggest games in the entire World of Darkness line. Unlike other games that still have minor private followings and a decent yet smaller convention appearance, I can almost guarantee you will see at least 2 to 3 Changeling the Lost tabletop games and or LARPs whenever you go to a gaming convention. And honestly, I think that this is going to be the bigger talking point today. This game is a crit. Right there. It is one of the biggest crits of all time. It's one of the greatest games of all time. And that's not even really in question. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people who are going to say in the comments that they dislike it. I get that. But in this reviewer's opinion, and in a lot of opinions of people out there, Changeling the Lost really is one of the greatest games of all time. And how it got there, how it got to that point, is, in my opinion, the more interesting and compelling story here. So instead of just reviewing this game based on its merits, we're going to look at history and see how this game went from its original roots in Changeling Dreaming as a fantastic game with a very small following to arguably the true flagship game of the Chronicle of Darkness series. So let's start off with the obvious here. What is Changeling the Lost, and how does it differ from Changeling the Dreaming, its predecessor? Well, New World of Darkness gave a massive retooling to just about every game in the old line, but none changes rapidly from the source material than Changeling the Dreaming to Changeling the Lost. The original concept was taking on the role of fey creatures trying to fight off the banality in the real world. It was about keeping that spark and that beauty inside of you while being surrounded by dull, dreary, gray mundanity. Changeling the Lost, however, took things into a much darker route, changing the focus away from fey creatures and making it a story about people who were abducted by fey creatures who actually managed to escape Arcadia and climb back over the hedge to our world, which was much more in tune with traditional fey mythology, source material, that the game was based on. And ultimately, this would actually prove to be not only the right decision, but one of the best decisions that these companies have ever made in terms of the World of Darkness lines. Don't get me wrong here, Changeling the Dreaming was phenomenal, and still is one of the most underrated games in the World of Darkness line, both old and new. However, it did sort of stick out like a sore thumb, Not to the point of Mummy the Resurrection that honestly completely alienated its fan base, but the fact is that in the World of Darkness, Changeling glowed just a little too bright. Which, if you will watch from my earlier video, this was both a blessing and an eventual curse. Changeling Dreaming gathered a strong and surprisingly large fan base that it still holds to this day, but it definitely felt like this game was on the verge of something astronomically great, but didn't quite get over the hump. A retooling and pushing back to the dark roots of the series was what was needed in order to really push it just that little bit further. Sometimes sticking with what you know is honestly the best bet. I get that sometimes you really need to push outside your comfort zones and create something different, and especially for World of Darkness, Changeling the Dreaming was definitely needed in a game that was very morose and very dark and very gritty, let's say, for at least 1990s to 2000s time. But really, whenever it come to Chronicle of Darkness, this game needed to go back to its roots. It needed to go back to something dark, but still have a little bit of beauty inside of it, which really is the theme of the game. It is this mix of darkness and just gray, gothicness, but there's still just that hint of something gorgeous on the horizon. And really, it made the game absolutely spectacular. It was a perfect storm. Changeling the Lost brought in the subculture of society that was truly enamored with the Fae mythology and saw a legitimate representation of what a Fae creature was and what happens to those who are affected by the Fae. It brought in World of Darkness fans who wanted a gothic modern horror feel and aesthetic to their games. It brought in hardcore system crunchers who saw the best blend of story and the best blend of system for the game. It also brought in fans of the original game as well, and did not alienate them unlike other games in the franchise. And honestly, that is probably the most important part. I mean, we could still talk about how the game needed to be retooled, and that's really important too. But this one just edges just a little bit closer, in that whenever the Chronicles of Darkness came out, it really did alienate a lot of old World of Darkness fans. Especially people who were huge fans of Vampire the Masquerade, Mage the Ascension, Werewolf the Apocalypse. Changeling the Lost really did not alienate its fan base, and for that, it pushed itself forward. Listen, say what you will about gamers, and say what you will about your own personality and experiences. But you have to admit that when it comes to tabletop gaming, the majority of us are typically afraid of change to a large degree. Not only does change come with an entirely new book set to purchase, but after getting immersed in a world and getting used to a particular dice system, it really hits hard when those things are taken away and we have to start from square one. It is because of this that New World of Darkness, Chronicles of Darkness, got a lot of harsh feedback from fans of the classic series. It's because of this that we had to get a whole new book set, we had to learn a whole different mythos, and we had to learn a whole different system, which admittedly needed a shit ton of retooling. I freely admit that I fall into this category too, and will only play Vampire the Requiem if there is nobody willing to play Vampire the Masquerade, my preferred game. But the fact is that there was a significant fan base that cried foul seeing their favorite games changed. Vampire, Werewolf, and Mage were the three big. They were the tentpoles around this entire franchise, and they were the ones that people typically got connected with the most. So whenever they got switched up, there was a harsh backlash because, well, new incarnations were different from their old ones. However, this definitely opened the door for the limited series runs to finally shine. They could actually step into the big boys club and transcend out of the limited series and into the main series. And it really was for people who are diehard fans of the classic run limited editions. This was their opportunity to see their game flourish. And the game that truly did it was Changeling the Lost. Most games in Old Line got a retelling at some point in the franchise, but the one that tended to get the most universal and non-divisive acclaim was the limited runs. Hunter the Vigil was widely considered to be a great game and even better than Hunter the Reckoning, though I will challenge people on that one. Demon the Descent, Mummy the Curse, and Geist the Sin Eaters were all seen as better reincarnations than the Old World of Darkness lines of Demon the Fallen, Mummy the Resurrection, and Wraith the Oblivion. But it was Changeling that stepped forward as the powerhouse. Having a small fan base that was happy with the old product but truly wanted a strong reincarnation made it the prime candidate for success, and sure enough it was. Which is why I'm just going to come out and say it. If we're talking about the flagship game, the true flagship game, Vampire the Requiem got overtaken by Changeling the Lost as the true flagship game of Chronicles of Darkness. Oh, I am definitely going there. I am going there. Vampire the Requiem was an admittedly good game, but it will always be overshadowed by its predecessor, and ultimately there are more people willing to pick up Masquerade than they are to pick up Requiem. There are just too many old wounds that refuse to heal, especially from older gamers in the community that then transfer their Vampire the Masquerade to the younger generations that they end up playing with and bringing into the subculture. But Changeling the Lost? It has been arguably the most successful and most enduring of the Chronicle of Darkness line. It truly is the perfect storm. It was the perfect blend of the new system. It was the perfect incarnation that could bring in so many fans into this one area. It truly was the best retelling, the one that needed to happen, and has really become the most enduring over time. Vampire the Requiem may be touted as the flagship game for anyone who's pushing the World of Darkness line nowadays. But the game that was the most enduring, the game that is truly going to go down as one of the greatest of all time, and the true flagship of the Chronicle of Darkness, New World of Darkness line, is Changeling the Lost. What else is there to say? Changeling is the greatest in the Chronicle of Darkness line. It simply is a sublime game that tells a great story, has a dark tone to it, and yet is still fun to play, and gets involved with traditional Fae experience, and there's this still dark beauty about it that truly shines forward. And that is it. Changeling the Lost really is one of the easiest crits I've ever had to give on the show, and is going to remain one of the easiest crits of all time. It is truly a perfect game.